A wealthy merchant once walked into a rabbi's study, his fine robes trailing behind him, gold rings adorning every finger, and yet his eyes carried the weight of 1,000 sorrows. He stood before the wise teacher and asked a question that echoed through the centuries. "Rabbi, I have accumulated more wealth than my father, my grandfather, and his father before him. My storehouses overflow with grain, my purses heavy with gold, my lands stretch beyond what my eyes can see in a single day. So tell me, why do I wake each morning feeling as though I have nothing? Why does my heart feel like an empty vessel despite all that surrounds me?" The rabbi looked at him with eyes that seemed to pierce through the veil of material reality and said something that would forever change not just this merchant's life, but the lives of countless generations who would hear this wisdom. He leaned forward and whispered 5 secrets, 5 things that the truly wealthy guard more carefully than their gold, more protectively than their most precious jewels. These weren't just suggestions or philosophical musings. These were ancient keys passed down through generations of Jewish wisdom, tested in the fires of exile and prosperity alike, proven through centuries of both suffering and abundance. Now, before we unlock these 5 secrets that have been guarded in the treasure houses of Jewish wisdom for thousands of years, I need you to do something powerful right now. If you sense that this message has found you at exactly the right moment in your life, if you feel that stirring in your spirit that tells you this is more than coincidence, I want you to type these 3 words in the comments. I receive abundance. Don't just type them mechanically, speak them over your life as you write them. And as you do, tap that like button, because when you engage with wisdom, wisdom engages back with you. The sages teach us that when we acknowledge truth, truth acknowledges us. You're here for a reason, and these ancient teachings are about to reach the exact people who need them most. You see, what makes Jewish wisdom about wealth so remarkably different from everything else you've heard is this. It doesn't see money as either completely good or completely evil. It doesn't tell you that poverty is holy or that riches are sinful. Instead, it treats wealth as a profound spiritual responsibility, a test of character, a tool that can build or destroy depending on the wisdom with which it's handled. For thousands of years, the Jewish people have experienced both devastating poverty and extraordinary wealth, exile and establishment, loss and restoration. Through it all, the sages observed patterns, studied human nature, and distilled their findings into teachings preserved in the Talmud, the Mishnah, the commentaries of great rabbis who understood something most people never grasp, that how you handle abundance reveals who you truly are at your core. This isn't about religion in the way you might think. This is about timeless principles that govern how wealth works in the spiritual and material realms, principles that operate whether you believe in them or not, just like gravity works, whether you acknowledge it or not. Walk with me for a moment into the world of ancient Jerusalem, where merchants traded spices from the east and fabrics from distant lands, where the marketplace buzzed with the energy of commerce and the synagogues resonated with prayers for provision and blessing. In this world, the rabbis noticed something fascinating. Some families maintained their wealth across generations, while others rose quickly and fell just as fast. Some merchants were respected and honored, while others, equally wealthy, were whispered about and avoided. The difference wasn't in how much they had accumulated. The difference was in what they understood about the invisible laws governing prosperity. These weren't written in ledgers or taught in the marketplaces. They were whispered from father to son, from teacher to devoted student, shared in quiet conversations after the scrolls were read and the candles were lit. They were the secrets of sustainable wealth, of prosperity that didn't corrupt, of abundance that blessed rather than cursed. And here's what's extraordinary about this moment right now. As you're reading these words or listening to this message, you might be experiencing something you can't quite explain. Maybe you've been praying for a breakthrough in your finances. Maybe you've just come into some money, or you're on the verge of a significant opportunity. Maybe you've been wealthy for years, but something feels off, something feels unsustainable, and you sense that you're missing a crucial piece of understanding. Or perhaps you're nowhere near wealthy yet, but something in your spirit knows that abundance is coming, that a season of increase is on the horizon, and you're here right now receiving the wisdom you'll need to steward it properly. This isn't random. The ancient sages believed deeply in divine orchestration, that certain teachings find certain people at precisely appointed times. They called it Beshet, the idea that everything happens in its destined moment. You being here, right now, encountering these 5 secrets, this is your appointed moment. Let me tell you what's about to happen as we journey through these teachings together. You're going to hear things that make you uncomfortable because they'll challenge the way the modern world tells you to handle success. You're going to encounter wisdom that contradicts the loud voices on social media telling you to showcase every blessing, broadcast every win, and publicize every achievement. You're going to learn why the quietest rivers run deepest, why the most enduring wealth is often the most invisible, and why the people who truly understand prosperity move differently than those who are merely performing prosperity. And as each secret unfolds, you might find yourself thinking about specific situations in your own life, specific mistakes you've already made, or specific dangers you're currently facing without even realizing it. That recognition, that moment of, oh, this is exactly what I needed to hear, that's the fingerprint of divine timing on your life. The Talmud, that vast ocean of Jewish wisdom compiled over centuries by the greatest minds of Israel, contains thousands of discussions about every aspect of human existence. But woven throughout its pages is a consistent thread about wealth. It's a test, perhaps the most difficult test a human being can face. The sages teach that poverty is hard, but wealth is harder, because poverty tests your faith while wealth tests your character. When you have nothing, you must trust God for everything. But when you have abundance, you must resist the temptation to trust in your abundance instead of in God. This is why we see so many people handle lack with grace and dignity, but crumble when prosperity arrives. They were never prepared for the unique dangers that come with having more than enough. They didn't know the secrets, the protective wisdom that guards not just your wealth, but your soul in the midst of your wealth. These 5 things we're about to explore, they're not about being secretive or deceptive. Jewish ethics place enormous emphasis on honesty and integrity. This is about wisdom, about understanding that some things are sacred and private, that not everything is meant for public consumption, that discretion is not the same as dishonesty. It's about recognizing that in a world where everyone is watching, judging, envying, and comparing, there are certain things that lose their power when exposed to too much light, like photographs that fade in the sun or medicines that break down outside their protective bottles. The wealthy who endure, who build legacies that span generations, who use their resources to genuinely bless the world, they understand these boundaries instinctively. And those who don't learn them eventually discover why these secrets were guarded so carefully in the first place. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone just like you made a fortune and is about to lose it all because they never learned these principles. Right now, someone is destroying relationships, inviting dangerous people into their lives, and setting themselves up for heartbreak, all because they're giving away things they should be guarding. And right now, someone else is building something extraordinary, something that will outlast them and bless their children's children, precisely because they understand what you're about to learn. The question is simple. Which person will you be? Will you be the one who treats these ancient secrets as quaint suggestions, or will you be the one who recognizes that wisdom preserved for thousands of years just might contain the keys to everything you've been asking for? The merchant who walked into that rabbi's study so long ago had to make the same choice, and his decision echoed through his entire family line for generations. The rabbi looked at the merchant with compassion and began with the first secret, and as he spoke, the merchant's eyes widened because he realized he had already violated this very principle just that morning. The first thing you must never give away when you become wealthy is your complete financial picture. Never let anyone know exactly how much you have, exactly where it's stored, exactly what you own down to the last detail. And I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking this sounds like paranoia or excessive privacy, but listen carefully to why this matters more than you could possibly imagine. The Talmud teaches the concept of ayin hara, the evil eye, but this isn't superstition. It's a profound understanding of human nature and spiritual reality. When people know exactly what you have, something shifts in how they see you, how they treat you, and most dangerously, how they feel entitled to what is yours. There's a story told about a man in a small village who inherited a vast fortune from a distant relative. In his joy and perhaps his naivety, he gathered the entire village and announced exactly what he had received, every coin, every property, every investment. He thought he was sharing his happiness, being transparent and honest with his community. Within 6 months, his life became unbearable. People who had been his friends suddenly looked at him with resentment. Distant cousins he'd never met appeared claiming family obligations. Business partners inflated their prices knowing he could afford it. Beggars camped outside his door not with humble requests, but with angry demands. His children were targeted by scheming families trying to arrange marriages for all the wrong reasons. And worse, much worse, he discovered that people were no longer relating to him as a human being, but as a walking treasury, calculating in their minds what percentage of his wealth they deserved. Here's what the wise ones understood that most people miss. When you reveal your complete financial picture, you invite 3 deadly forces into your life. First, you invite envy, and envy is like a poison that seeps into relationships and corrupts them from within. Your friends begin comparing their lives to yours, and every decision you make is scrutinized through the lens of your wealth. You buy something modest, they think you're being cheap. You buy something nice, they think you're showing off. There's no winning because the problem isn't what you do, the problem is that they know too much. Second, you invite false judgment, because people will make assumptions about how you got your wealth, whether you deserve it, whether you're managing it properly, and they'll do this from a position of complete ignorance about your actual situation, your challenges, your responsibilities. And third, you invite spiritual opposition, because there are forces in this world that feed on envy and resentment, and when you broadcast your blessings, you're essentially painting a target on everything you hold dear. The sages teach us to share our blessings, but guard our numbers. There's a vast difference between letting people know that God has blessed you and giving them an itemized account of every blessing. You can be generous, you can be encouraging, you can testify to God's goodness without ever revealing the specific details that turn you from a person into a prize, from a friend into a resource to be exploited. Think about it in your own life right now. Who knows exactly what you have? Who have you told about that raise, that bonus, that inheritance, that business deal? And since they found out, have you noticed a shift, even a subtle one, in how they interact with you? Maybe they started making comments about what you should do with your money. Maybe they started mentioning their own struggles a little more pointedly. Maybe you sensed a distance growing, a resentment simmering beneath friendly smiles. This is why the truly wealthy move in silence, why old money teaches its children discretion, while new money shouts from the rooftops, until there's nothing left to shout about. The second secret the rabbi shared cuts even deeper, and this one challenges everything modern culture tells you to do. Never give away the complete details of your strategic charitable giving. Now wait, before you misunderstand, let me be absolutely clear. The Jewish tradition places immense emphasis on tzedakah, on charity and righteous giving. It's not optional, it's fundamental. But here's the profound wisdom that most people miss. How you give matters as much as what you give, and the highest form of giving is when neither the giver nor the receiver knows the full story. Maimonides, one of the greatest Jewish scholars who ever lived, outlined 8 levels of charity. And the highest level is giving in a way that preserves the dignity of both parties, where the giving creates no shame, no debt, no power dynamic that corrupts the purity of the act. When you announce every donation, when you publicize every act of generosity, when you make sure everyone knows exactly how charitable you are, something insidious happens to your soul. The giving becomes about you rather than about the cause. The act that should have been building your character starts feeding your ego instead. You begin to give not because someone needs help, but because you need the recognition, the applause, the social media likes that confirm you're a good person. And here's the devastating part. Every time you receive that recognition, that praise, that public acknowledgement, you're cashing in the spiritual reward that was supposed to be stored up for you in the eternal realm. The Talmud teaches that when you seek honor for your good deeds, you receive that honor and nothing more. It's like exchanging diamonds for costume jewelry, trading eternal reward for temporary applause. But there's something even more dangerous about publicizing your giving, and this is where it gets really personal. When everyone knows you're generous, when your charitable giving is public knowledge, you create a situation where people stop coming to you with genuine needs and start coming to you with calculated requests. You can't tell anymore who really needs help and who has simply identified you as someone who can be manipulated through their public commitment to giving. Your inbox fills with sob stories, your phone rings with emergencies, and you find yourself drowning in requests that you can't possibly fulfill, bearing guilt for needs you can't meet, and worst of all, becoming cynical and hardened toward legitimate suffering because you've been burned so many times by false claims. The wealthy who publicize everything eventually build walls to protect themselves from the onslaught, but in building those walls, they often wall out the very opportunities to make a real difference that wealth should have opened up for them. Let your giving be like the roots of a great tree, hidden beneath the surface but nourishing everything above ground. Give generously, give strategically, give consistently, but let your left hand not know what your right hand is doing. When you help someone, help them in a way that preserves their dignity and your own spiritual purity. Let God be your witness and your accountant, because he keeps better records than any social media platform ever could. The families that have sustained wealth and used it for good across generations, they give more than you could imagine, but they do it so quietly that the world never knows the full extent of their impact. And that's exactly how it should be, because the goal isn't to be known as generous, the goal is to actually be generous, and there's a universe of difference between the two. The third secret strikes at the heart of family dynamics and legacy, and if you have children or plan to have children, listen to this with every fiber of your being. Never reveal your complete inheritance plans to your children while they're still developing, while they're still supposed to be learning work ethic, character, and resilience. The Talmud warns extensively about this, telling stories of wealthy families that destroyed their children's potential by letting them know too early just how much was waiting for them. Because here's what happens in the human soul when you know that wealth is guaranteed regardless of your efforts. Ambition dies, discipline crumbles, and a poisonous sense of entitlement takes root like a weed that chokes out everything beautiful that could have grown in that garden. There was a wealthy man who loved his son dearly and wanted to spare him the struggles he himself had endured. So he told the boy, when the child was only 12 years old, that he would inherit a fortune so vast that he'd never have to work a day in his life if he chose not to. He thought he was giving his son peace of mind and security. Instead, he watched over the next decade as his son drifted through life without purpose, trying one thing after another with no commitment because deep down, nothing really mattered since the money was coming anyway. The young man never developed the resilience that comes from facing real consequences. He never built the character that emerges from overcoming genuine challenges. By the time he actually inherited the wealth, he had no idea how to manage it, no understanding of its value, and within years, he had squandered what had taken his father a lifetime to build. And the most tragic part was that he never became the man he could have been, because the knowledge of guaranteed wealth had robbed him of the very struggles that would have forged his character. The wise approach is this: teach your children values long before you reveal values with dollar signs. Let them know they come from a family that believes in hard work, generosity, integrity, and responsibility. Let them see you working, managing, giving, and being faithful with resources. Give them opportunities to earn, to fail, to struggle, and to overcome. Build their character first, test their faithfulness with small things, and watch how they handle responsibility when the stakes are low. Then and only then, when they've proven themselves capable of stewarding resources wisely, when they've developed their own work ethic and sense of purpose independent of your wealth, then you can begin to reveal more. But even then, wisdom suggests you never reveal everything, because the moment someone knows exactly what's coming, the hunger for their own achievement often dims. The greatest gift you can give your children isn't your money. It's the character and capability to create their own success, with your wealth serving as a safety net and amplifier rather than a substitute for their own development. The fourth secret is about power dynamics and strategic wisdom, and this one might surprise you because it seems so counterintuitive in our age of oversharing. Never broadcast whose advice you seek, who your counselors are, who sits in your inner circle helping you make important decisions. The Talmud speaks extensively about the value of wise counsel, teaching that plans fail for lack of advice, but succeed with many advisors. But notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say announce your advisors to the world. There's a reason the most successful people throughout history have kept their advisors and counselors private, operating from a position of strategic ambiguity that protects both themselves and those who guide them. When you publicize who advises you, several things happen that work against your success. First, those advisors become targets. People who want to influence you will now try to get to you through them. Those who oppose you will try to discredit your decisions by attacking your counselors. Your advisors can't give you honest, unfiltered wisdom if they know that their counsel will become public knowledge, subject to scrutiny and criticism from people who don't understand the full context. Second, you reveal your strategy. If people know who you're consulting, they can often guess what you're planning. The business competitor who knows you've hired a particular type of consultant can deduce your next move. The family member who knows which attorney you're meeting with can infer what legal arrangements you're making. You're essentially showing your cards before the hand is played. And third, you create obligation and resentment simultaneously. People who think they should be in your inner circle but aren't will resent being excluded. People you do consult will feel obligated to perform for an audience rather than simply giving you their best thinking. The wealthy families who maintain their position across generations, they have advisors that the public never knows about. They have counselors who guide major decisions from behind the scenes. They seek wisdom from rabbis, mentors, and trusted friends whose names never appear in any news article or social media post. This isn't deception, it's wisdom. It's understanding that the most valuable counsel happens in private conversations where brutal honesty is possible, where mistakes can be acknowledged without shame, where strategies can be debated without becoming public spectacles. Keep your counselors close and their wisdom private, and you'll find that the quality of advice you receive improves dramatically because people can be honest with you when they know their words won't be broadcast to the world. And now we come to the fifth, and perhaps most profound secret, the one that ties all the others together and reveals the deepest wisdom of the Jewish tradition about wealth. Never publicize your spiritual practices around money. Never broadcast the private covenants you've made with God regarding your resources. Never turn your sacred financial commitments into performance art for public consumption. This is the secret that separates those who have wealth from those who are wealthy in soul, those who possess money from those who have learned to let money serve its highest purpose without corrupting their spirit. The relationship between you and God regarding your finances is intimate, personal, and sacred. It's in this private space that you wrestle with questions of stewardship, that you make promises about how you'll use resources, that you acknowledge your total dependence on divine provision, even in the midst of abundance. When people truly understand wealth from a spiritual perspective, they recognize that every dollar, every opportunity, every successful venture is ultimately a gift, a test, and a responsibility all wrapped into one. But the moment you make this understanding public, the moment you start performing your spirituality around money, something precious is lost. You start giving to be seen giving. You start praying about finances so others will know you pray. You start talking about stewardship in a way that draws attention to how spiritual and responsible you are. And in that subtle shift from authentic relationship with God to performance for others, the whole thing becomes hollow. The very practices that were supposed to keep you grounded and humble become sources of pride. The commitments that were meant to be between you and your Creator become testimonies to your own righteousness. You end up like the Pharisees that the ancient prophets criticized, who made a show of their piety while missing the heart of what God actually cares about. Here's what the sages understood. True wealth is a partnership with the divine, where you recognize that you're not an owner but a steward, not a possessor but a manager of resources that ultimately belong to God and are meant to flow through you to accomplish purposes larger than yourself. But this understanding only stays pure when it stays private, when it's worked out in the quiet places of prayer and meditation, when it's tested in the secret decisions that nobody ever sees. The wealthy person who quietly tithes, who makes anonymous donations, who prays over business decisions in private, who feels accountable to God rather than to public opinion, this person has found the secret to sustainable prosperity that doesn't corrupt the soul. Their wealth flows like a river that's been properly channeled, bringing life wherever it goes rather than flooding destructively or stagnating into a swamp. And so the merchant left the rabbi's study that day with these 5 secrets burning in his heart, and the story goes that he went home and made immediate changes. He stopped discussing his exact financial situation with anyone who didn't absolutely need to know. He continued giving generously, but let his giving become quiet and strategic rather than public and performative. He stopped telling his children they'd inherit a fortune and instead focused on teaching them the values and skills that would make them worthy of one day managing resources wisely. He protected the identities of his advisors and counselors, seeking wisdom in private rather than making a show of consulting experts. And most importantly, he deepened his private spiritual practices around money, having honest conversations with God about his fears, his responsibilities, and his desire to use wealth as a tool for blessing rather than a weight that would drag his soul down. The emptiness he had felt despite all his possessions began to fill with something no amount of gold could purchase: peace, purpose, and the quiet confidence that comes from handling abundance with wisdom. Now you're at a choice point. Everything you've just heard, these 5 ancient secrets guarded carefully through centuries of Jewish wisdom, they're not meant to just be interesting information. They're meant to be applied, lived, integrated into how you handle whatever level of resources you currently have and whatever level is coming. Because whether you have a little or a lot, these principles scale. They work when you're managing your first $1,000, and they work when you're managing millions. Start guarding these things now, start building these habits of wise discretion now, and when greater abundance comes, you'll already have the character and wisdom to steward it well. Remember to go down right now and type those 3 powerful words in the comments: I receive abundance. Not as magic words, but as a declaration that you're ready to align your life with these timeless principles. And make sure you subscribe to this channel because you're going to want to hear what comes next.